In the previous section, we looked at how content and context are both critical to designing an effective and compelling piece of data communication. Now we'll look at some basic data visualizations that can help jumpstart your visualization efforts. You may have noticed we use a lot of images in this and our other courses, and there's good reason for that. Plenty of cognitive psychology and neuroscience research has shown that people are much more likely to remember information that is presented as a combination of visual and written information than just reading alone. And as we saw with the Napoleon's March example, you can pack a lot of pretty complex information into a really solid visualization. Visual design is its own entire field of study, so we can't cover it all here, but we can give you a few tips. There's plenty more design principles out there that come into play when designing data visualizations, but we're going to pick 3 that are really key. Let's take a closer look at each one. In his seminal book, The Visual Display of Quantitative Information, noted visual design expert Edward Tufte described what he called the data-to-ink ratio, urging people to decrease the amount of non-data ink as much as possible in any visualizations they produce. That means eliminating unnecessary tick lines, backgrounds, patterns, borders, and labels, what Tufte actually called chart junk, bringing the focus directly to the data themselves. Consider this example from his book, An Old Brazilian Economic Visualization, which uses both color and pattern in ways that only complicated and confuse instead of illustrate and inform. In your work, aim to minimize any elements that don't directly contribute to a clear, easy-to-understand graphic. Remember this guy? We're bringing him back, not just because he's our favorite, but also because he's a great example of how visual proportions can be misused. Is it just us, or is that 61% torso a lot more body than those 78% legs? Proportions can help you tell a compelling story, but they have to be accurately reflected in the data and how you display them. Consider instead this area chart from the online baby name wizard, which lets the proportions speak for themselves. As an analyst, it's hard to resist the temptation to show all your work. But remember, you're trying to tell a story and reach a decision, answer a question, or pick a direction. This is related to the simple principle. People can only handle and remember so much information at a time, and you want to hone in on the things you want them to remember. Take this hypothetical data set about heroin-related hospital admissions over time. On top is just one of the many ways you looked at these data. It is thorough, but far too much for any other person to take in and see the patterns. Intentionally highlighting key things about your data by combining very selective text and graphics, as shown below, can both help focus your presentation and keep people's attention. There's one caveat. You don't want to cherry pick your data such that you exclude data that are relevant or highlight in such a way that you are obfuscating other important aspects of the data. In one sweltering week in August 2016, first responders in Cincinnati, Ohio were inundated with emergency calls to deal with a record 174 overdoses of heroin. It's an epidemic that's occurring across the nation, in urban areas and in rural ones, and affecting people of all ages, incomes, races, and other demographics. This compelling data from the National League of Cities shows the explosion in opiate-related overdose deaths between 2002 and 2014. Maps can convey a great deal of information in a compact space, and this particular combination of maps over time tells a very powerful story. To respond to the issues they were seeing related to this in Cincinnati, the city undertook a significant set of data-related efforts. In this next video, Chief Data Officer Brandon Crowley describes some of that work and how they are using it to try to tackle this issue in Cincinnati.